Hey friends, welcome back. What was that all about?
What happened?
I don't know. I thought you like made a little motion or something like
I,
that.
I didn't mean to.
Okay. Well, welcome back, friends. For those of you guys who don't know us, I'm Mark. I'm a certified health coach, and this is Teresa. She's a board certified family nurse practitioner, and we are with Total Health and Wellness, and we'd like to talk about hormones, metabolic health, and everything in between. So today we are going to talk a little bit about the differences between ketogenic and low carb because we use those terms. We're going to talk a little bit about carnivore as well, but we use those terms very loosely, and we kind of take liberty when we're talking about low carb or keto and kind of use them interchangeably. So we wanted to be a little bit more specific today and just talk about that a little bit. So
Yeah, and remember, what we do might not work for you. And we're not telling you you have to do this. We're just showing you options and showing you what worked for us. And we struggled our entire lives with weight. And these are options.
yeah, this is not the only way. It's just a way to go about obtaining a metabolic health and fat loss.
Yeah.
So a little bit of background on keto. So when we're talking about keto or ketogenic diets, really we're talking about a very strict therapeutic type of a diet. And so the earliest history with regards to keto goes back to actually it was about 500 years BC. So 500 years before Christ was born. There were people who were using a combination of fasting and or therapeutic dietary interventions and stuff to treat things like epilepsy and cancer and whatnot, or things that they maybe didn't understand. They were just trying that out with. So I thought that was actually pretty cool because when I what I understand about ketogenic diet and the history of it is what I'm about to talk to you guys in a second about. But that's the history of it from like the 1900s. So the early 1900s, around the 1920s, actually, there were providers and doctors were using a ketogenic way of eating with epileptics. So children who had epileptic seizures, and they were treating it very effectively with the ketogenic diet. So it wasn't until a little bit later than that pharmaceuticals came about. And when pharmaceuticals came about, they started replacing everything. All the traditions that we had, all the traditional medicine, no matter what it was, got replaced. Chiropractic medicine, naturopathic medicine. Chiropractic medicine was actually, and naturopathic medicine was actually very popular before pharmaceutical drugs.
It was the medicine.
It was the medicine. And actually, what ended up happening is it was made illegal. Like chiropractors could not practice in the United States at all. It was against the law for them to do so. And then there was no schools for them to learn it in the United States.
That was after the 1910 Flexner report that the Rockefellers did.
Yeah.
So they closed down all the natural medicine schools and colleges.
Yeah. So we moved to this more pharmacological approach to treating these different illnesses. But in the 1920s, it was very effective, and they were using ketogenic diet pretty widely. I mean, what were you about to say?
I was going to say, I don't know the date, but Gary Taubes, I think it's his latest book on the history of diabetes. That's not the actual name, but in the early 1900s, we were using a low carb diet for type 1 diabetics because insulin, there was no such thing as insulin. And they knew to keep blood sugars low, you feed fat and protein. So all of this stuff was mainstream until petrochemicals took over.
Pharmaceuticals, yeah, for sure. But and anyway, the good news is that in the last 10 or 15 years is that we have seen the ketogenic diet being used therapeutically, just an explosion in that usage again. Like it's growing by leaps and bounds, literally. So anyway, that's the good side of it. But anyway, let's talk a little bit more about what the difference is between like a ketogenic and a low carb diet. Before we do that, let's just go ahead and knock carnivore out right now because carnivore is super easy to do. I mean, that's not easy to do, but it's easy to talk about. So do you want to talk about that real quick?
That's VLC, very low carb. And so carnivore is essentially zero carbs. And so I was telling Mark we should do a video about all the misinformation about things. But in one of my carnivore groups, I saw I'm pretty sure it was a guy say it doesn't matter. His trainer said, you can't do low carb. You have to have carbs. And he's like, well, I've been doing this for 3 years. So, but very low carb is carnivore. And so that's essentially just meat and fat. And we call ourselves ketovore because we do 90-10. So we do 90% meat and we do 10% coffee, spices, avocado, tomato and onion, and then vegetables on Sunday night's dinner.
Yeah, some onions on our steak or something like that. So yeah. But yeah, but for somebody who's a carnivore purist out there who's watching this, we respect that 100%.
Sure.
But a lot of the carnivore purists, there's no coffee, There's no vegetables. There's no nothing.
Spices.
If it's plant-based, it does not go in their mouth.
Right.
So it's pretty much just red meat for the most part. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's some people who say it's not sustainable, but it's worked fine for us. Anyway, all right. So low carb versus keto. So let's talk about keto again. Ketogenic diet being the therapeutic diet, very strict with regards to high fat intakes. When we're talking about strict with fat intake, it's really about 70-80% total of your total calories that you're eating. Remember, calories are made up of three things: carbs, protein, and fat. So about 70-80% of all the calories total will come from fat. Then you'll have moderate protein and you'll have moderate carbohydrate, or very low carbohydrate, so less than 5% usually. Yeah. So that's kind of what a ketogenic approach is. Did you have something you want to add?
No, and if you're doing it for epilepsy, you have to hit those kind of numbers. Yeah. You have to have that fat super high so you can have tons of ketones protecting your brain from seizures.
Oh yeah, and speaking of that, besides epilepsy, what else can we use keto for if we're going to use it therapeutically?
What not? I was just talking to one of my son's girlfriends while I was cooking dinner, and she was saying her eczema, and I was like, I promise you, if you go low carb, because she's trying to change, if you go low carb, your eczema is going to be way better. So what can't you?
Yeah, but just generally speaking, obviously diabetes, PCOS, cancer, especially breast cancer. What were the other
ones? Prostate
cancer,
colon cancer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And fatty liver. There's quite a few people that have walked through my doors in the last couple of weeks that have said they have a history of fatty liver on ultrasound or CAT scan of the abdomen. So fatty liver, mental health. Oh gosh, there's so much that can be done with mental health.
Depression, ADHD in kids really too is a big one.
Autism can be significantly improved. I mean, they've done Okay, yeah, we're going to get off track.
It's so easy to do. So the next one, so that's a ketogenic diet in a nutshell, and that's what it makes up. So primarily fats, 70-80%. And then you have low carb. So low carb tends to be a little bit more balanced, is basically it. And again, we use these interchangeably all the time. We probably shouldn't do that, but low carb is technically you're using more of a balanced distribution, a higher, slightly moderate fat intake with a slightly moderate protein intake, and then a slightly lower than normal carbohydrate intake.
Yeah.
And when I say normal, I'm talking about versus the normal standard American diet. So what is normal with that? I mean, some people are eating hundreds of grams of carbs a day.
Okay. So that's what I say in the office. When I'm talking to someone about food and I really need them to change, and I say the words low carb, people get freaked out. So say whatever you want. You could say you're going to eat whole foods and no sugar, and no one would blink an eye. But when you say low carb, people lose their minds. But I will say to people, most people are eating upwards of 300 grams of carbs a day. So if I ask them to do 100, which is not low carb by any standards, even a stretching of standards, but low carb at 100 from 300 is low carb, relatively speaking. So where you came from, 100 grams is a great place to start. Other things like you're talking about PCOS, if I want to reverse PCOS or diabetes, then I say 30 grams or less a day. But there's nothing wrong with 50 grams if you exercise a lot. I don't, got my weighted vest on, but I go to the gym twice a week. 100 grams of carbs if you exercise a ton, but it just is all relative to what you're trying to achieve.
And I think it's appropriate because we should touch on this. We've got plenty of time to do it, is to talk a little bit more about diabetes, because that's really probably where the ketogenic and some low carb actually really shines. And that's what most people are looking to reverse is a pre-diabetic, insulin resistant, diabetic type metabolic disease that they're looking to reverse or put into remission or whatever you want to call it. And that includes people with type 1 as well. Type 1 and type 2 can both benefit from this greatly. Right. So go ahead.
Because type 1s, if you don't manage your diet, will always also become type 2. So type 1s will become insulin resistant. And my girlfriend, who's been my girlfriend for a long, long time in Florida, she texted me the other night. She was super mad. And this just goes to show you, if you're interested, you can learn whatever you want to learn, because she taught me a lot before I got into this space. And she cleans houses for a living. She has her own business and she cleans houses. She's not medical, but she's smart. But anyway, she texted me. She's like, I'm super mad. Like WTH, a friend of mine got diagnosed with diabetes. Her A1C which is your diabetic diagnosis. She was like 10.6, which is a raging diabetic. And now she's 7.1. And her physicians told her that that's normal, that that's exactly where she needs to be. And I was like, yeah, it's super frustrating. But the ADA, the Diabetic Association, and the Endocrinology Association say, and depending on which association you're looking at, if your A1C is between 7 to 7.2 or 7.3, they say you're controlled. 7.0 A1C is your daily average blood sugar of 170 to 180. That is not controlled. That blood sugar is wrecking your coronaries, wrecking your carotids, and setting you up for heart attack and stroke, which is what diabetics are at an exponential risk of than the lay people, like just normal people without diabetes.
Yeah.
So it's super frustrating.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw in a quick caution too for those carnivores who are looking to go into who are also type 1 diabetic. You've got to be careful with that because protein can cause issues for type 1s. Okay, right. Low carb and keto, not so much.
Right.
But if you're a type 1 diabetic and you want to go, carnivore is probably not the way to go, just to play it safe.
Right.
I wanted to throw
or just, I don't know if it's not the way to go, but you're really going to have to pay attention and like significantly biohack your body, because protein in type 1s can create more of an insulin spike than people like us that are in type 1s. Yeah. So that's all you have to really remember. But honestly, we all eat the same food every single night. Like we were debating, do we show our food? And Mark's like, it's burgers, eggs, and bacon. We have that 5 nights a week. So we don't need to show it, but we all eat the same food. So if you can figure out how much insulin you need for the kind of meat and the size of meat, then that would be helpful.
Yeah, and that's another really good point when you're talking about insulin, is we like to talk about how if you're following the Western medical establishment's recommendations for insulin, because you're a type 2 diabetic, for instance, type 1 diabetic, or possibly a type 2, then you're eating your food according to how much insulin you're taking.
Yes.
We do the exact opposite of that. We say that's wrong. We're going to actually eat a certain way, and we're going to adjust our insulin based on the way that we're eating. In other words, if you're a type 1 or type 2 and you're on insulin and you go low carb, you're going to need less insulin, quite a bit less. You have a great, fantastic patient down in Florida.
Record holder in my office for an A1C is a type 1 diabetic. He's probably now like 56. His A1C when I started with him was 8, and his endocrinologist told him he was controlled with diet and exercise. And I was like, come again? Because that's like a 200 daily average of blood sugar. So he holds the record. He got all the way down to 4.2, and now he hovers somewhere between 4.7 and 5. And he tried to get life insurance, and the life insurance people called me, and they're just like, why is his A1C this low? And I'm like, because he actively manages his type 1. You're not used to seeing this. You'd probably give him an expensive life insurance if he was a diabetic in the 7s, but because it's 4.2 anyway.
Yeah. And I have to go into this too, because I love talking about this study that was from Harvard in 1971, but it's a fantastic, so one of the big hangups that people get with getting into ketogenic and low carb lifestyles is their sugar is going to get too low. They're worried, oh, my blood sugar. Listen, your body can make all the blood sugar that it needs on its own without you putting anything in your mouth. Your body can create it. You need very little sugar. Let me give you an example. What does your blood sugar typically run when you get a level done on your
60s
glucose? So you're in the 60s.
Yeah.
So her level, according to Quest Diagnostics, is in the 60s. Is that considered low? Is it considered high? Low normal?
Low normal. I don't actually know what the cutoff is for a low blood sugar reading.
All right.
High is 99 and above.
Well, in 1971, these really cool guys from Harvard got together and they're like, you know what? We're going to do a study on a bunch of people. We want to see how low we can get their blood sugar without killing them. So they took 30 or 40 or 50 patients, whatever it was, and they fasted. They put them on the Jesus fast. They made them fast for 40 days and 40 nights. Okay.
In the hospital.
In the hospital, medically supervised. Okay. So they had an eye on them very closely. At the end of 40 days of these people fasting, you know what their blood sugar was? It was an 18. Nobody had symptoms. Everybody was totally fine. Nobody was dying. Everybody was okay. They said, well, I wonder how low we could get this blood sugar before we had a problem. Let's give them insulin and let's cut their blood sugar in half. They did it, and guess what? Everybody was totally fine. They cut their blood sugar from an 18 to a 9, and those people were absolutely perfectly fine. Okay, again, medically supervised. But
because after 40 days of fasting, or however long it was, you're making ketones.
They were pouring out ketones.
Right.
All that means, guys, is they were tapping into their fat stores. Their fat stores were breaking down, and they were turning into ketones, which were circulating in their blood. And as their body needed it, they sent those ketones, or that fat that had broken down, to the liver, and the liver used a process called gluconeogenesis, where it converted the fat into sugar. It's amazing. Our bodies are divinely created. You eat fat or you eat sugar, and your body can turn it to fat, and it can store it.
Yep.
And when you need sugar, your body can take fat and turn it to sugar and use it for fuel. It's amazing. So I love that study. It's so cool.
And I know that one time I was showing my CGMs and my blood sugar was like steadily at 50. And there was a girl in town who was after us for a while and kept writing bad reviews. She never even saw us. She just didn't like our online presence. And she was telling me you have to remember that my blood sugar was way too low. And what was I doing? But she's a Western medicine provider.
She said she approached you, or she had a problem with you because of your hypoglycemic state, which already
really
is wrong.
Dangerous.
Because, well, first of all, you have to have symptoms to be. There's no such thing as asymptomatic hypoglycemia. Like, it doesn't matter how low your blood sugar is. If you're fine, you're fine. So you were fine.
Well, here's the thing. I have showed you guys one of my sons, Nate's meal on his CGM, where it's oatmeal, banana, yogurt.
Dippin' Dots?
No, not that one.
Oh, not that one.
I think it was oatmeal, banana, yogurt. I feel like there was one other thing. It was a standard American diet. And his blood sugar went from 50s. He would run 50s and 60s, shot to 250, and then straight down to 95. That's reactive hypoglycemia, but no one's going to say 95 is a low blood sugar. 50 is low. But you're only symptomatic depending on where you came from. 250 to 95, you can still be symptomatic. But if you're just hanging out in the 50s and 60s, you're going to be totally fine.
Yeah. In fact, if you're way up here and all of a sudden you just stop and you drop
to a normal
level, you're going to feel terrible. You might even pass out, or or worse. But yeah. So it's all relative to what your lifestyle is, where your markers run, and whatnot too. So and again, what I was talking about earlier, medically supervised, not something that we're saying to go do, fasting.
No, but the medical establishment, endocrinology for diabetics, type 1 or type 2, say if you're injecting insulin, eat to your insulin and eat and correct with insulin. Mm-hmm. You do not want those excursions of highs and lows. That's what damages your blood vessels.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Did we hit everything? That was it. I think we covered everything that we wanted to talk about today.
So the other thing too is when you say low carb or keto, people think high fat, and then they get like confused thinking your arteries are going to gum up, which is not true. But if you have a ton of fat to lose in the beginning, high fat makes you satiated or full. So that gets you longer without having a snack. But as you graduate and you have to keep moving the needle down, like on the scale, or everyone, I hate to use the scale, but that's what people are looking at, or clothes fitting. But if you want to keep moving the needle, sometimes you have to back down on your fat so your body takes yours and not what you just ate. But that's not for starting off, okay? But that's just if you hit a stall or something else later on, you can decrease the fat.
Yeah. Well, once you become fat adapted, which takes a different amount of time for everybody, we're all different. Then your body becomes very comfortable with taking fat from storage and then utilizing that for your fuel.
Right. Because we just eat a normal amount of fat. Neither one of us take a stick of butter and eat it like a popsicle.
No, we don't have to do that.
Some people do that, but we don't. So we aren't excessively eating fat because my BMI is, in the upper double digits. So
not where you want it to be, but we're getting there.
I mean, it's going to be in the double digits. That's healthy, but it's,
All right, guys. Well, where are we at right here? We're at, we've been going for a little while. We're at almost 20 minutes. So I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. But anyway, if you guys have any value, if you find any value in this, please consider liking or subscribing to our channel if this is your first time here. If not, just throw us some hearts or some emojis or, any kind of a comment. All that's really helpful to us. And as always, guys, we love you. God bless you. And we'll see you next time. And don't forget, food matters.
Bye.
Bye, guys.